Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Animals in the Bible Study podcast. I'm your host, Wesley Bear, and on today's episode, I wanted to look at a bit of a familiar passage. Um, we're not going to go into all the details of this passage, but it's just something that I was thinking about in terms of how we understand the fallenness of our world and how we struggle with that and stuff. You're wondering, what are you talking about? Uh, well, let's get into it. But I also want to say that this is also important passage because it's about the redeeming of that. How do we deal with that, but also in the knowledge that it's going to be redeemed? And so, if we go to Isaiah chapter 11, if I can find it. Here we are. Isaiah chapter 11. Now, this is a very famous passage because we have things involving the prophecy of the Messiah. We have stuff involving the history and genealogy of Jesus. We have um, the promise of the future kingdom, all sorts of stuff going on in this chapter. But there was a part that I really think kind of really stands out. Everyone goes, when looking at especially kind of peace in the future kingdom, everyone goes to verse 6, which is um, that, um, and the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the young goat, and the calf and the lion, and the fatted steer will be together. But like but that's kind of benign in some ways in terms of because we're like we kind of get a very natural reading of things, and it's like how far, like animals not eating other animals, okay, fine, but one of the things that we also have to wrestle with is the animals interaction with nature. How do we relate to what's going on in this passage? And I think the most telling verse is in verse 8. The nursing child will play by the hole of the cobra, and the winged child will put his hand on the viper's den, and they will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. The first half of verse 9. And so, one of the things that I was really struck by is because of the association of snakes as symbols, particularly of evil in the Old Testament. Of course, we have the story of the serpent in Genesis, though, of course, I think there's something else wholly going on there. Of course, it's not a real serpent or not a real snake. But we still see that snakes seem to have some sort of strange relationship to man. I remember finding out that out of all the fears that we have in the world, for some reason, snakes are an inherent fear. That there's possible the only fear where we can see a genetic marker of, not of spiders, not of anything else. That fear of snakes is almost a genetic thing, which is interesting. I remember hearing that and having my mind blown. But it's hard not to see why. Um, Venomous snakes in particular have caused hundreds of thousands of millions of deaths, probably if you count up like throughout the entirety of history. The fact that up until about, the 60s and 50s, we didn't really have anti venom. And so we can imagine the number of death tolls of people who have died from snake bites and stuff. we have, of course, prior to this, the very famous story in Numbers 21, which is the story of uh, God sending poisonous snakes to bite the grumbling, uh, unrepentant uh, people of Israel, right? And we have the bronze serpent and all that. And I'm not going to go into that today, maybe another time. But we see snakes, even God using snakes as at times a punishment upon an unrepentant people, or at least a symbol of that. And then we have snakes uh, symbolism in Revelation, all sorts of other places. So snakes have always played a huge part. And in fact, I wanted to go into this more detail with the fact I did some research on this, that we have um, things like Russell's viper, the Indian cobra, the inland taipan, the eastern brown snake, black mamba. Um, all these snakes have been very deadly for humans. Inland taipan, thankfully, while probably the most deadly snake, has rarely resulted in serious snake bites, at least in the last 50, 60 years, thanks to anti-venom. And there are species you don't really encounter in day-to-day life versus the southern taipan. But the inland taipan, for example, has basically all three major forms of venom that result in uh, anticoagulation, muscle breakdown, nerve breakdown, tissue breakdown. And so the those kinds of toxins are not only very um, deadly, but I mean, you go through a whole lot of pain going through all that. How your body just completely shuts down and turns its basically against itself. Um, and so we have snakes like that. We have the snake. Some of the most venomous snakes are also in our oceans, like with the sea kraits and the sea snakes. And so there's just an amazing amount. I mean, again, like I said, with the average death toll from snake venom each and every year is around 50,000 to like 140, 150,000. So quite a number of people die from snake bites, mainly just due, mainly thankfully in this kind of era, it's mainly just due to neglect. We have anti-venom for pretty much everything now, but still, due to neglect in some places, just poor access, um, it's still very much a threat to human life and civilization. And so, of course, you would never, in a million years, let an unattended child play near a cobra hole or a viper hole, right? And so it's pretty, and I'll provide links to some of this stuff in the description. Um, but so the question is why snakes even exist in our world. I mean, we have snakes as being one of the most biggest deterrents of rats and mice on our planet, but the destruction snakes cause on a huge level is ridiculous. The invasive species, such as what's going on in uh, Florida with the uh, pythons that have been released, and devastation that's been going on there for decades now. Um, Pretty crazy, yeah. And so, yeah, we even have giant snakes. Squeeze anything, a lot of things to death. So we have that, and so it's all pretty crazy once you think about it. And so rather than going on a whole spiel, I just want to sit in the knowledge that God's somehow going to redeem that. That's the promise of Isaiah 11. Out of all the redemptive acts in nature, I think that's kind of one of those things where you go, what's going on? Why do snakes exist as they do currently in our world? What's their purpose? Um, Again, I mean, they're amazing creatures. Being able to have the Jacobson's organ is an amazing feat of science that basically allows snakes to basically sense through tasting the air. They detect prey, kilometers away, and uh, have sense through the shifting of the earth, and all that sort of stuff, and sensing critters run past them and all that stuff, and they basically can see even in pitch blackness because of their all the other senses coming at them, and so snakes are pretty amazing to be able to catch, kill, and eat prey in such an efficient manner. But you're wondering, like, was it worth making? And venomous snakes are kind of one of those things. But I mean, now we find that in if we study a lot of snake venom and we um, count see the effects today, uh, thanks to antivenom, we've had cures for a number of pain relief, all sorts of stuff like that. There have been a number of cancer researchers who have looked into snake venom as a possible cure for cancer because of the way it attacks your body cells. And so basically, if we have snake venom on a possible quite a bit lower level, we could that could be used to save millions of lives, and it's used because of the especially the coagulants have been used in blood pressure medication, preventing heart attacks, and all that. So, I mean, there has been a benefit to a very moderate uh, venom of snake venom, but again, we can ask, is that enough to counteract that? And so, I think the amazing thing is that uh, God has created a beautiful, beautiful world that's just fallen. That the world is controlled by a serpent. His name is the devil, and I think he corrupts his corruption, and the corruption brought by sin and death has led to disastrous results in all corners of the world. And animals are just another part of that. And snakes, for whatever reason, have caused are up there were one of the biggest causes of death in the natural world. And yet somehow God is going to redeem snakes to the point where a child will be able to play by a cobra hole and never be bitten again. And if and not just not killed by the bite, but never be bitten. And that's an amazing thing to think about, that God is planning redemption even for an effect that has caused hundreds of thousands of people to lose their lives. And so I just want to sit in that and kind of just recognize that. Um, and it doesn't mean I have all the answers. I don't. I don't think numbers 21, for example, is like everyone who's ever been bit by a snake is somehow like guilty of the same sins of the Israelites. I think that's ridiculous and silly, and it's just a judgment upon every single person who's ever been bitten. I don't believe that. Uh, we know that the devil seeks to kill and destroy, and so he wants to um, kill us, destroy human life, and um, destroy it. And he has destroyed the healthy nature between human and man. The fear of man towards all animals is very palpable. So it's not just snakes. But it's still amazing to think even that will somehow be redeemed. And I don't see it. Maybe I don't know if that's how that's going to work exactly. Will like it ha like could it mean that there's no snakes anymore? I highly doubt that. That doesn't seem to be the implication of that. Is it metaphorical of something else? I don't think so. That doesn't seem to make much sense to me. Right? Like, is it just a metaphor for just how far things will be redeemed, but we'll still have poisonous snakes and venomous snakes that are going to bite people like that? I highly doubt that. That doesn't seem very just or reasonable. I mean, so I don't know. I don't understand fully how all this plays out, how it works, but I know God redeems. He's redeemed me, the sinner, and I know how much harm I've caused people through my words, my actions. I don't have poison, venomous teeth, but I've created venom towards certain people at times. So, I mean, I'm not like I haven't. I'm not usually that kind of person, but I mean, we've all done it at some point or another. We've said terrible things to one. I've said some terrible things to people even I love, and so if God can redeem that, surely He can redeem the nature whose all they do is kill. How much do our words hurt soul and spirit, right? Uh, Bible tells us that the tongue is as dangerous as fire. Well, it's dangerous in the same way a serpent's bite is. Um, so we all have to be careful and wary when we talk about some of this stuff too. Is like, yeah, the animal world has fallen, and we can see its tragic effects, and it's even greater than snakes. And we'll talk about that maybe at some point. But I think how much destruction humans have caused toward one another. Even I have done it to other people at times. Maybe not on a huge scale of any kind, certainly not. But I can think of that, and so I think we all have to see that God's able to redeem. If God can redeem the relationship of man between man and man, how much more so is He going to be able to redeem the relationship between uh, nature and us? Because the relationship between man has been far more deadly than any snake bite, I think. So, just some thoughts, and just something new to think about, and just meditate on, at the very least, God's goodness and His ability to redeem. So that's just my thoughts. And so I just wanted to speak to that, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and just make that part of your day to focus on God's redemptive work is going to be completed. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. God bless. And be sure to check out my other stuff. Like, I have a Drawing Animal podcast where I specifically just talk about animals and all the cool natural stuff. in the world, and then on this channel, and I have drawings and all sorts of other stuff. I'm hoping to post just more and more stuff, zoo reviews and all sorts of other stuff. So just look for whatever you can find on his channel. If there's something you enjoy, be sure to please like, comment, and subscribe. And also check out my books. I have links at my channel that you can look at. And so there you are. Have a wonderful day.